statewide. What that did was allow the Department of Education for incentives above and beyond your base rate, which rate is 35% here. If work, that's what you would be reimbursed from, assuming you had bond, we are able to pursue additional reimbursements. So bringing Barrington to 52.5% reimbursement, so 50 cents on the dollar. In order to be eligible for those, you have to meet certain criteria. For example, some of the sort of easier ones to identify would be the safety and security upgrades, because that is, they're not expensive to do, but they're incredibly important, as we all know. Educational enhancements also provide you additional bonuses, as well as newer and few other that we will touch upon in the present. These incentives start to expire in December of 2023. There is, although we've all heard that there will be another potential 250 million limit that we're in right now. So essentially where we are soon, it actually is part of this process where this is the opportunity, not the dead last, but really sort of towards the tail end of when we will be able to pursue those. And depending on whatever solution the community decide to move forward with, depending on the scope of those projects. So again, educational values in line with your district educational plan and the like would hit. Okay. So my name is Jessup. I'm an architect and an educational facility planner. What that means, because it's not a very common title, is that my work essentially exists at the intersection of facility and education. I am not an educator, but what I do is I sort of work with educators to understand how facility affects curriculum and vice versa, and try and find ways that enhance and positively impact the learning environment. So as if you were in the middle school before versus you are now, the physical space is drastically different because the way we teach children is different. So I essentially want to talk to you today about the RIDE Stage 1. In short words, it's the statement of need. It does not come up with the solution at all. What it does is identify what needs you have as a district and a community. So essentially, you look at all of your buildings. Obviously, there's not really a need at the middle school now, so we're focusing on the elementary schools and the high school, and we do both facilities assessments. So we look towards the engineering to the architecture to find out any sort of repair costs that go big picture into the schools. We also look at those educational components. How do we align space with the current pedagogy and what the pedagogy of the future may be, which is different than when these buildings were built in the 50s. These buildings do not necessarily facilitate that curriculum effectively. So part of the process, again, we need to look at a lot of different things throughout your district. We look at swing space, which will be important anytime there's a project. So where do the kids go to school if a school is under construction? And then there's these things called priority 1 and 2 deficiencies. And what that is anything that's really broken. So if you have a boiler that is beyond its useful life that we know is going to need replacing, those fall into the must-do projects. So depending, again, on the scope that you decide to move forward with as a community, we do have to look at all of your schools and make sure there's nothing that's sort of falling apart or needs immediate repair as part of that. And that will be part of the project. That was also done during the middle school project. One important thing to know is that although there's nothing decided today, we will look towards solutions over months, assuming you support the submission of this document. And when we do that, we will look to come up with the solution, whatever solution that is. Only 50% of that dollar value that's determined at that point is required to be done. So there is flexibility even once you do have your memorandum of agreement with the state. And again, the 4 items you can see on the bottom: safety and security, decrease overcrowding, educational enhancement, and replacement candidates. That was identified by the state 2016 Jacobs report as a replacement. You do have a building who meets that standard based on the amount of repair work identified at that time. So those are the 4 pieces that'll get you your bonuses up to 52.5%. Our Studies have shown that you do have overcrowding issues in your schools already, which is impacting the learning environment. So you would qualify for, at minimum, all three of those: safety and security, decrease overcrowding, and educational enhancements, likely with any project work that you move forward with. It's just a list of the requirements. I won't necessarily go through them all. I'm happy to answer any questions on it. You can see there's no options in this list. What it is essentially all of the data that will help us come up with whatever solution it is in the future. So we sent our teams in, they looked at all of the equipment, all the boilers, the roof quality, the windows, buildings. And that gives you a baseline for, well, what if we then want to solve some other issues from an educational standpoint? Again, we look at how do the buildings support or not support the long-term educational vision. Although this RIDE process is a 5-year process, we're working with the district on what is the sort of the 20-year plan. We don't want to be doing something in the next 5 years that goes against what may be frugal or the right choice educationally for the long term of the district. Moving forward, just running you through some of the things that we've worked on already, and I've mentioned most of it already. We've been to almost weekly, I'd say, facilities committee meetings, sort of going through, working with the group that was developed as part of the middle school project. So they're already boots on the ground, helping us to understand the community better. We have lots of data that has been compiled over the past 20 years of studies done by other firms, other surveyors, and information that we sort of have to go through. We have all the principals toward the buildings during the summertime when the students were not in. We've looked at sort of some of the challenges, particularly with COVID, that the principals had to deal with, distancing and the like in smaller classrooms that were developed in the 1950s, which were standard. We looked at all the facilities from an engineering standpoint, and we've been playing around with sort of some concepts, but nothing has been decided at this point. Most importantly, for this group to know is that through the fall, we will be developing a schedule of community engagement that is going to range from everything from working with the student, maybe sort of concerned about how this may impact them personally, but also to understand what this allows Barrington educators to do should work move forward. Moving forward, this is very small.
Do so in a fiscally responsible way. That's through this process. We're able to capture the.
In terms of our middle school, that's done and dusted, or does this have any impact on our middle school?
Hopefully we're going to exceed that by attaining some of these thresholds that we've been shooting.
We communicate with the public when this discussion gets underway. We'll be looking to every field
point. So from that, they're currently in the process of the acts. We're learning about critical thinking, collaboration. A great example is trying to work as a team for the
and that's understandable from and
a wonderful opportunity. And it's good to hear that we don't.
To explain everything. We're at the grocery store all the time now, but I think it's an important as possible because there is a lot of learning pieces, and I think knowing that obviously there is a result that will affect the community regardless of what is going to happen.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Breyer.
Looks like is asked of us,
document sort of all of this data that we collected. It does need signature by a municipal representative. There are 3 documents that need signing from the.
Okay. And in terms of a signature from us, do you need before our next meeting? And if so, what is the document that we would need to sign? Opposed? And then we have been presenting. One is a letter to members in here, and then another is to, who's the school building authority director, and that that is sort of the cover letter for our submission and what we.
Half of Barrington School Committee, the Building Committee, and all of Barrington Public Schools, we want to thank.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on the composition of the ad hoc Watson Avenue Development Committee. There's a memo in our packet that choose to appoint a committee ourselves or just accept. We don't need to endorse it, but we chair planning board more than 12 years. And this is, right in his wheelhouse. Obviously, he's the town planner, and so he's familiar with all of this kind of thing. But in terms of public engagement, Phil has been doing this forever. He's when we did our initial comprehensive community plan, he had different proposals out, and people put stickers on and listed what they were, and then we were able to kind of read through that. We took input in that way for the aspect. My view is that
aligned with that. So I think that we should establish this. I don't have any issue with the folks included. I think it's a good list of people with a few additions.
okay. So because I guess the difference, basically the difference between a town manager's committee and a council.
I think the manager had intended to make it subject to the OMA.
The first.
So I would say especially.
So I'll make a motion that we endorse the Barrington Town Manager's Ad hoc Watson Avenue Development Committee with the additions mentioned, the two as the liaison to that committee for the Barrington Town Council.
And typically, we default to residents of Barrington. On a separate issue, if you look at the backside of that memo, the second opinion, we want equality. It can be a very gruesome. I think that one, and we'll take a look at the municipal judge as well with next year's salaries increases in next year.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't know if this particular notice on page 1 of the memo has gone out. That mentions a stipend of 20.
Jim, that you're bringing in another brand new judge that hasn't had the experience in this.
Sometimes 5. So that's why we averaged it out.
Typically, and say,
I think, yeah, and Mike is also a probate judge. Duties would fall to whoever their profession.
For selection.
so
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Further, okay.
I guess the most actionable item that I know respect to a draft ordinance that they had put forward with respect to outdoor dining. I know that's something that
With that to do with COVID. But certainly like the planning board would, and maybe we can come up with a COVID.
so
We could also task planning board came up with the idea of an ordinance relating to outdoor dining. But they also, planning board is a committee that has a lot of other
the boards and commissions more directive, and having a deliberative process that would produce a result from a board and commission, even before you get to the ad hoc stage. And I'm wondering if that would be something that, and I'm trying to keep, given had what seemed to be successful, and people realize this might be a good idea. Whether it is or isn't, maybe we'll discuss it at some point in the future. But so that's an example. An example of what did we learn during COVID? Should pressing things in an emergent manner as quickly as possible. I thought it was amazing, frankly, from at the time a resident's perspective. It would be nice to replicate that. Is there? I assume there's something that we can make sure that okay, we need to do this, this, and this moving forward. To see, what thoughts do they have in terms of what they saw that did work, didn't work, et cetera. So that,
In terms of lessons learned, if we have to go through this odds test or exercise every year, med pods, I forget what medicine point of distribution system, I think it is, set up and they practice in the high school. Okay, folks who are 90, I guess, 90 batches of a vaccine, do it any way you want. Well, that's not the MedPod system. The MedPod system kind of presumes that we're either inoculating everybody or inoculating it down, and we're going to get everybody's age. He's going
Committee or whether
to step, whether it's an ad hoc committee or something like that. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
And actually put forth, some, I guess harder suggestions as opposed to, again, just similar to what we're doing now, just going off the cuff and brainstorming. Because you brainstorm and then you narrow it down to more concrete.
Act on the East Providence sewer. Jim Cunha will take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. President. Need of $4 million in repairs. Barrington typically month to month pays about 25% of that bill for that plant based on what percentage of effluent we're putting into that plant. It's typically 25 to 30% of that repair bill. The problem is we are the cause of the deterioration. It's proven by the engineers because they've taken the readings. Our sulfate levels are at a point where it's impacting the operation of that plant. With a contract over a course of, now the other good news is the ARP funding, the American Rescue Plan funding, specifically lists in for this repair on the $10 million worth of
private entity, and that entity started as, I believe, a Viola and then Suez, and so it was enlarged to, brought up a little bit. We're average day, Barrington is about 1.1 million gallons of sewage a day. We pump with our 15 pump stations to East Providence every day. During the wet season, we have infiltration and inflow into our pipes, daily flow. But when you design a main, you don't just design for the average day, we're protected from the gases. So as Jim mentioned, gases form the long, the pumping and pumping, those gases have been there for years. It's about so over time, with the new facility, Suez, they encapsulated the headworks, and we believe that headworks was encapsulated with the concrete, but it wasn't coated. Right now with the wet weather, we're in the Alfred Drown area that actually burps the pipe. It's a high point in the pipeline system that we have at Brickyard Pond, it constantly. But during the wet weather, we monitor it, and there's times during the extent is,
So we're at about 0.5 unrestricted if we do.
fund. We do a restricted fund.
It ends up there. I don't want to authorize
Yeah.
more because I'm always afraid that somebody's going to find some way to, if there's money out there, let's spend it. Let's come up with a another part of this or something. So
So 40% of 1.6 million, whatever is less.
rescue plan funding for payment not to exceed the lesser of 40% of the,
She will continue to do an excellent job. I'm sure of that. And the suggested motion would be to approve this bid,
resiliency planning consultant in the amount of $32,000.
yes, with 22,000.
Kim, as part of she had already been working on what was the rating system?
Yes.
But then we engaged her as in this position, and she started getting,
Other communities that have bought those cars in the past. More than likely will not be 4x4s. And also they're aging and gonna need more repairs, and they're less safe. But they're both 4-cylinder vehicles, similar to what we bought the fire chief. I think that it makes sense from the
now, do we know right now, I know that one of the great advantages, and put it in,
Yes.
that isn't always the case because sometimes they upgrade the model here, or will be equipment for it?
that the proposal are going to be not line vehicles, so they're going to be less expensive all the way around the town.
Okay, that's great. That is a very good price, 32,000. I will ask if anyone wants to make a motion to award the bid in the amount of 65,000 to the group for the purchase of, in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions, that motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your support.
I'm recusing from this bid.
Okay, Counselor Breyer, direct, going to take us to that?
The Barrington Community Theater and the Barrington Enrichment Summer Theater. The sole bid that we received was from Kelly McCabe. Kelly has been doing this.
Questions? Okay, do I hear a motion to award a bid of 20,000, Executive Director, Community Theater, Barrington? Agenda for Monday, October 4, we'll discuss an act on solar fields. That was one that Resilience and Energy wanted to bring up. The discussion on minimum wage, the questions and data, that's Councilor Breyer. Discuss an act on street parking update, that's our town manager. Discussion on local taxes, elderly volunteers. There is a new law in place, and award the bid for Watson Avenue Real Estate. Consider appointing an ad hoc committee for
That sheet be able to be filled in advance.
Can interpret, you got everything that you need, you asked for and more. So if you have more specifics about, look like I fulfilled the requirement.
Okay, so yeah, the wait, but then,
So we'll
okay.
work on it.
And then
Make sure you get
also
what you need.
if a manager is under the 15, because you would, when this came up the first time, you brought up that there are tiered people, that if you move one, you have to move the person they report to. So I just want to be sure that we're able to understand that, the stratification.
Direct supervisor, okay.
And then also that this be on the next month's agenda.
I had intended for it to be on this agenda. I had to push a number of things off this agenda, because there were, one of the things, okay. Anything else to add to next month's agenda? To move A5, acquisition of property